Today, we're diving into one of the most legendary cavalry charges of the Napoleonic Wars, a battle that defied the odds and made legends of a small group of Polish cavalry. On November 30th, 1808, during the Peninsular War, French Emperor Napoleon was stalled at the Somosierra Pass in Spain, facing an impossible challenge: break through a heavily fortified Spanish defense that was holding the road to Madrid. The defenders had entrenched themselves along the ridges, with 4 consecutive entrenched artillery batteries, one behind the next, blocking a valley mountain pass armed with cannons and ready to repel any attack. In what seemed like an insurmountable situation, Napoleon turned to a cavalry unit from the Duchy of Warsaw, the famed Polish Chevaulegers, a light cavalry who were loyal to Napoleon for helping to re-establish a Polish state separate from the Russian Empire. Despite overwhelming odds, these horsemen were ordered to charge directly into the heart of enemy fire. What happened next is a story of courage, sacrifice, and an audacious charge that would change the course of the war. Today we'll explore the events of that fateful day, the men who made it happen, and how Napoleon's faith in this Polish cavalry led to one of the most daring military actions of the 19th century. November 30th, 1808, a day that would go down in history as one of the most extraordinary moments in the Napoleonic Wars. The place? Somosierra, an unforgiving mountain pass, 90 kilometers north of Madrid, a place where 125 Polish cavalrymen would make the impossible possible. But how did this small force of horsemen, against all odds, break through the Spanish defenses and open the road to Madrid? Let's rewind for a moment, back to the man who made it all happen. Emperor of the French, Napoleon Bonaparte. Napoleon had already achieved the near impossible in Europe, defeating coalitions of European powers and dominating vast territories. By 1808, he was determined to bring Spain fully under his control. His forces had already invaded Portugal, and now, with Spain under threat, the road to Madrid was the next obstacle. The Spanish, under General Benito San Juan, knew this route was critical. They set up a series of 16 cannons along 4 batteries at Somosierra, turning the pass into a nearly impenetrable fortress. Napoleon's infantry advanced, but the terrain was treacherous, and the Spanish guns were deadly accurate. The French soldiers were repelled, and casualties mounted. It was clear that something drastic had to be done. But Napoleon, well, he was no stranger to drastic measures. Napoleon, ever the strategist, sent a scout to investigate the Spanish positions. The scout returned with disappointing news. The Spanish were dug in, and the defenses were impenetrable. Taking them would be impossible. This report was not delivered in a way that Napoleon would accept. It was then that Napoleon, never one to shy away from a challenge, uttered his now legendary words: "Impossible? I do not know this word." Napoleon's defiance wasn't just bravado. It was a message to his troops and to himself. To him, the word impossible was simply not part of his vocabulary. It was a call to action, to do the unthinkable, and he knew exactly who he needed for this impossible task. Cavalry Napoleon turned to were the Polish Chevaulegers. These horsemen, similar to the famous Cossacks, were legendary for their speed, precision, and fearlessness. Commanded by Baron Jan Kozietulski, they were ready to face the impossible head-on. Now let's be clear, some historians believe that Napoleon may not have intended them to charge all the way through the batteries. Perhaps he only meant for them to take the nearest one to make way for his infantry. But for Kozietulski and his men, it was both an obligation and an opportunity to achieve glory. When the time came, in the early morning fog, 125 Polish Chevaulegers rode out. The command, "Forward, you sons of dogs!" What followed was pure chaos. Cannon blasts, the clash of swords, and the smoke of battle. The Polish cavalry charged through the fog. As they approached the first battery, they were pounded with a cannonade of grape shot. Dozens and dozens of 2-inch steel balls blasted from each cannon like birdshot from a giant. The charge shuddered as many comrades fell. "The Emperor is watching," shouted the commander to harden their determination. They regrouped and charged forward again. Before the first battalion could reload, the horsemen were in their midst. The Polish cavalry stormed through the fog and fell upon the first Spanish battery with unmatched speed and ferocity. They overwhelmed their defenders, but their success came at a high cost. As they captured the first position, they were met with heavy fire from the second battery, which was situated just ahead. With no choice but to press on, the Poles, now exposed to even fiercer resistance, found themselves in an increasingly perilous situation. The cannons of the second battery unleashed a devastating barrage of shots, forcing the cavalry to fight for every inch of ground. But rather than retreat, the Polish horsemen, driven by their pride and the pressure of their mission, pushed forward, charging at the next battery with reckless courage. They managed to break through once again, capturing the second battery as well, though the toll on their ranks was mounting. What began as a targeted mission to capture one battery quickly turned into a desperate race to neutralize each successive defense. By the time they reached the third battery, the remnants of the cavalry were nearly spent, and many of their horses had fallen. Yet despite the overwhelming odds, the cavalry continued their charge, driven not just by their orders, but by their fierce will to overcome what seemed like an impossible task. The first battery was captured, then the second, then the third, and with every charge the Poles advanced, taking battery after battery despite the crushing losses they suffered. Baron Jan Kozietulski, the commanding officer, had led the charge with unwavering determination, but the brutal conditions of the assault soon took their toll. His horse was struck down from under him, leaving Kozietulski injured and unable to continue leading the charge. Bruised and bloodied, he was forced to relinquish command to Captain Jan Kozietulski, one of his most trusted officers. Kozietulski, however, was not given a moment to process the shift in leadership before he was thrust into the heart of battle. The cavalry charge had not slowed, and despite the losses, the Poles continued to advance and take each successive battery. Kozietulski, now in charge, steered his men through the carnage, rallying them with some fierce resolve that had driven their initial assault. His leadership was crucial, as the men becoming fatigued and many of their horses were exhausted or injured. With each battery they took, the cost became more apparent, but Kozietulski's command kept the charge moving forward, ensuring the momentum of the assault did not falter. Lieutenant Andrzej Nowoleski, another officer who had played a key role in the assault, had already been gravely wounded during the charge, but he bravely returned to the front despite his injuries. His courage and resilience were a testament to the spirit of his men. Nowoleski would later receive the Légion d'honneur from Napoleon for his bravery, but at that moment, he and his comrades were fully immersed in the chaos of battle. Through it all, the Polish cavalry's determination never wavered, and their ability to adapt to the ever-changing tide of the battle played a pivotal role in the eventual success of the charge. By the time the Poles reached the final battery, the defenders, now overwhelmed with the sheer courage of their attackers, began to flee. The road to Madrid was open. Napoleon, having witnessed this feat, was in awe. He saluted the survivors, telling them, "You are worthy of my old guard." The charge had lasted only 7 minutes, but in those brief moments, the Polish cavalry had rewritten what was possible. The victory at Somosierra came at a heavy cost. 2/3 of the Polish cavalry were killed or wounded, but their sacrifice ensured that Napoleon's army could continue its march to Madrid. They would take the city within a week. This charge became a symbol of Polish bravery, remembered even today. It inspired the Polish national anthem, Dąbrowski's Mazurka, a rallying cry for the Polish independence. So next time you hear the word impossible, just remember, for the Polish cavalry at Somosierra, impossible was not a word in their vocabulary. For more tales of Napoleonic history, be sure to hit the like and subscribe button before you go, and let me know which legend I should cover next in the comments. Until next time, forward you sons of dogs, and vive l'Empereur. I'm Connor with the Motion Visual. See you next time. Peace.